Today we're doing Tanya for the 17th of Teves. It's my oldest son's birthday, the 17th, which is Gematria Tov. He was born on a Tuesday, Tov Ma'od. Anyway, so today's lesson, the after effects of devotional prayer, love and awe of Hashem, provide sufficient strength to the Beinonei to ward off the animal-like soul during the rest of the day. As soon as negative thoughts or feelings arise within, the Beinonei consciously pushes it away, not entertaining it willfully, rather doing the reverse. So rak shelazeh ma'il harshimu b'mochin v'yiras Hashem v'ahavasai hamsu Teves v'chalal haimani. However, the impression retained in his mind from his meditation during prayer on Hashem's greatness and the natural love and fear of Hashem hidden in the right part of his heart enable him to prevail over and dominate the evil animal soul's cravings, preventing the evil from gaining the supremacy and domination over the city, the body, and carrying out its cravings from the potential to the actual, by clothing itself in the organs of the body in actual speech or deed. V'afilu b'mayach levadai v'harher bara ein lo shalit umemshala v'harher chas v'shalom b'tzoino shemaychai. Furthermore, even in the mind alone with respect to sinful thought, the evil has no dominion and power to cause him, God forbid, to think such thoughts consciously. V'yakabel b'ratzain chas v'shalom hirhor zeh hara ha'olah Me'elav mehalev lamayach kanizkar la'el. For example, to cause the mind to accept willingly, God forbid, the evil thought that arises of its own accord, unbidden from the heart to the mind, as explained above in chapter 4. Evil thoughts will occur to him involuntarily because the evil in his heart craves evil. However, the evil does not have the final say on what he will let his mind accept willingly. The Beinonei's conscious mind is dominated by the divine soul. Eila miyad bali yasoi l'sham doichehu bishtei yadayim umansiach dato. Instead, immediately upon the thoughts rising to the mind, he, the Beinonei, thrusts it aside, as it were, with the both hands, and averts his mind from it. Miyad shaniz Shahu Hirhor Ra, the instant he realizes that it is an evil thought, he will refuse to accept it even as a subject for mere conscious thought, and will certainly not entertain the notion of acting on it, God forbid, or even speaking of it. Ve'enu makabla v'ratzain afilu lahaher bo v'ratzain v'kol shekain lahaloso al hadas lasoso chas v'shalom O afilu l'daber bo. He will refuse to accept it even as a subject for mere conscious thought, and will certainly not entertain the notion of acting on it, God forbid, or even speaking of it. Ki ham harher baratzing nikra rasha ba'oisa sha. For he who willingly indulges in such thoughts is deemed a rasha at that moment. Beinonei Eino rasha afilu sha'achas le'olam. While the Beinonei is never wicked, even for a single moment, obviously then the Beinonei would not willingly entertain evil thoughts. The discussion of his mastery over his animal soul has thus far centered on matters pertaining to man's relationship with Hashem. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I'm not sure if that was recorded because it was on a different system. Anyway, where were we? We were excuse me, trying to figure out what we were doing now. Evil thoughts, we'll just go back to where I remember that we read. I think we read it, and we should be able to go straight into it from here. Evil thoughts will occur to him involuntarily because the evil in his heart craves evil. However, the evil does not have the final say on what he will let his mind accept willingly. The Beinonei's conscious mind is dominated by the divine soul. Instead, immediately upon the thoughts rising to the mind, he, the Beinonei, thrusts it aside, as it were, with both hands, and averts his mind from it. The instant he realizes that it is an evil thought, he will refuse to accept it even as a subject for mere conscious thought, and will certainly not entertain the notion of acting on it, God forbid, or even speaking of it. He who willingly indulges in such thoughts is deemed a rasha at that moment, while a Beinonei never wicked even for a single moment. Obviously, then, the Beinonei would not willingly entertain evil thoughts. Well, I've heard a spin that, everyone obviously is a work in progress, and this ideal Beinonei is recreated every second. Of course, one second he could be a complete Beinonei, and the next second he could end up being a rasha if he let himself go there. But the ideal is obviously to be able to maintain that Beinonei state at the ideal level of the Tanya, like constantly. And supposedly this is very possible. Especially, I don't know. I'm not going to say when Mashiach comes, because at that point there will be no evil. So then there's a whole other probably system in place at that point when there's no evil to combat. The discussion of his mastery over his animal soul has thus far centered on matters pertaining to man's relationship with Hashem, and now moves to another area. V'kein divarim shebein adam l'chaveiro, so too in matters between man and his fellow man. The Beinonei will not grant expression, thought, speech, or action to any evil feelings towards his fellow. Miyad she'oile loy mehalev l'moach ein zo Tina Vasina Chas Shalom, as soon as there arises from his heart to his mind any animosity or hatred, God forbid, O Ezoi Kina, O Kas, O Kafeda, Vadoi Mehen, or jealousy, anger, or grudge, and the like, he will bar them from his mind and will refusing even to think of them. Eino Makablan Klal, Mamoichai Uvertzainai. V'yadarba mayak shalit u'moshel b'ruach shebeliboy la'asois ha'hefek mamish. On the contrary, his mind will prevail over and dominate the feelings of his heart to do the exact opposite of that which the heart desires. Lehis naheg im chaveiroi b'midas chesed, namely, to conduct himself towards his fellow with the quality of kindness. As opposed to the quality of severity, where hatred and anger originate. V'chiba yiseira mudas loy lizbol mimenu ad katse ha'acharein, and to display towards his fellow a disproportionate love in suffering from him to the furthest extreme. V'loy likos chas v'shalom, V'gam shaloi l'shalem loi kafaloi chas v'shalom, without being provoked into anger, God forbid, or to take revenge in kind, God forbid, even without anger. Ela adaraba ligmol l'chayavim tovos, but on the contrary, to repay offenders with favors. Kamo shekasu b'zeher lilmod mi Yosef im echav, as taught in the Zohar, that we should learn from the example of Yosef's conduct with his brothers when he repaid them for the suffering they brought upon him with kindness and favors. Someone has wronged you. Rather than hold on to resentment and anger, which can result in revenge, work towards forgiveness. Take it a step further. See if you can do them a favor. And that is how to be a Beinonei on the highest level.